The rain fell like bullets on the cracked pavement of New Geneva's industrial district, each drop exploding into smaller fragments that caught what little light filtered through the perpetual smog. Zaravax pressed her back against the cold brick wall, her crystalline skin shifting from pale blue to deep violeta biological response. Her species couldn't control when experiencing extreme distress. Plague spreader. The words cut through the drumming rain like shards of glass. Child killer. The mob had grown from a handful of angry dock workers to nearly 50 souls. Their faces twisted by grief and manufactured rage, they circled her. Like carrion birds, some clutching makeshift weapons pipes, bottles, chunks of concrete broken from the deteriorating sidewalk. Their breath steamed in the cold air as they hurled accusations and worse. Zara's once pristine lab coat, the symbol of her former life as a respected xenobiologist, hung in tatters around her shoulders. They had torn it during the initial assault, along with most of her clothing, leaving her exposed to both the elements and their hatred. The synthetic fabric clung to her trembling form, offering neither warmth nor dignity. Though her voice was barely audible over the storm, her native language had musical qualities that humans once found beautiful. But now, even her accent marked her as other, as dangerous. I tried to help your children. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, her face ravaged by loss and sleepless nights. My daughter Alina died screaming because of your experiments. 7 years old, and she dissolved from the inside out.
Ow.
The accusation hit harder than any physical blow. Zara had known Elena had tried desperately to save her, and dozens of other children, when the plague first emerged. She'd worked 20-hour days in the medical center, using her knowledge of both human and Andorian physiology to develop treatments. But when the deaths mounted and fear overtook reason, someone needed to be blamed. A bottle shattered against the wall inches from her head, sending glass fragments across her exposed shoulders.
Ow.
She didn't cry out, though the cuts burned like fire against her sensitive skin. Crying would only feed their anger, give them the satisfaction they craved. Look at her skin change colors. Someone laughed bitterly. Even her body knows she's guilty. Another voice joined in. Alien freak. Go back to whatever hell spawned you. The chromatic shift was involuntary deep, purples and grays swirling beneath the surface as her emotional state spiraled downward. Once colleagues had marveled at this biological quirk, comparing it to a living aurora. Now it was just another mark of her alienness, another reason to fear and despise her. Thunder rolled overhead as the crowd pressed closer, their momentary hesitation overcome by mob mentality and the shelter of collective action. Zara closed her eyes and prepared for the final assault, wondering if her sister Juno would ever learn. What became of her? Then she heard footsteps approaching from behind the mobcom, measured, somehow different from the chaotic shuffling of the angry crowd. The airlock cycled open with a hiss that seemed to echo through Zephora Night Whisper's bones. She stepped into the human sanctuary, her twin daughters pressed against her chest, their small wings fluttering weakly in the artificial atmosphere. Behind her, 8 other mothers filed through, each cradling their own precious Kargotha, last children of Velani Prime. The humans stood before them, weapon lowered but ready, his gray eyes taking in their desperate procession. Zephora felt his confusion, his fear, his reluctant compassion radiating in waves that her empathic senses could barely process after weeks of flight through the void. She'd grown accustomed to the cold emptiness of space, but this man's emotions burned like stellar fire. You're injured, he said, his voice rough with disuse, his gaze fixed on the crystalline shard protruding from her left wing, dark ichor, still seeping around the wound. The crash, Zephora managed, swaying slightly as exhaustion threatened to claim her. The crystal field. Your world's formations are sharper than our ships anticipated. One of her daughters mewled softly, a sound that made the human's expression soften despite his obvious wariness. Twins were rare among the Velani, considered blessed by the light singers of old. Only those ancient blessings could have protected them from the hegemony's purge. Juno, she whispered to the healer among their group, the children need I see them, Juno Starweaver replied, her luminous eyes already cataloging the various injuries among their group. A gash along her forehead leaked silver blood, but her 3 younglings remained unharmed, clinging to her robes with tiny, desperate hands. May we sit? The little ones have not known solid ground in many cycles. The human Marcus Zephyra, remembered from the light song visions, nodded curtly and gestured toward a common area. The space was utilitarian, built for one person's solitary existence. But her people had learned to make do with far less during their exile. Food, he said simply. Water. Medical supplies. Ow. What do you need most? Safety, Zephyra replied, meeting his eyes. Time to heal. The hunters, who destroyed our world, they followed the ion trails of every escape pod, every refugee ship. We chose your world because it sings with crystal light, like our lost home. The resonance masks our life signatures. She watched him process this information, saw the moment when his solitary existence became something more complex. The weight of responsibility settled across his shoulders like a familiar mantle, and she recognized a fellow exile, someone who understood the cost of survival. How many children? Marcus asked, his tactical mind already working. 14, whispered Vera. Moon Blossom, her voice breaking. Her single child, barely old enough to walk, had been injured in the crash. The youngest is 3 cycles old. The eldest, barely 12. And the 9 of you? Warriors, healers, teachers, engineers, Zephyra listed. We were the evacuation ship for the crystal gardens of Valenthara when the hegemony came. She closed her eyes, remembering the orbital bombardment, the screams of a dying world. We saved who we could. Marcus moved with efficient purpose, gathering supplies from hidden caches throughout his station. Water purification tablets, emergency rations, medical kits, designed for human physiology, but adaptable. 12 years of solitude had made him self-sufficient in ways that now served them all. Your wing, he said, approaching Zephyra with a medical scanner. That crystal shard is working deeper. If it reaches the nerve cluster, I will be grounded forever, she finished. A Valeni without flight is like a star without light, but my daughters matter more than my wings. Something in her words seemed to resonate with him. His hands, scarred and gentle, examined the wound with surprising knowledge. I've worked with crystalline formations for years. The fragments here, they're alive, in a way. They respond to certain frequencies. He produced a small sonic resonator, the kind used for mining operations. This might hurt, but it should convince the shard to release its hold. Do it, Zephyra said without hesitation. The sound was like crystal rain in a silver forest, high and pure and somehow mournful. The shard in her wing vibrated, loosened, then slid free with a sensation like ice melting in reverse. Dark ichor flowed for a moment before her Vailani healing factor took hold, the wound sealing with new tissue that gleamed faintly in the station's artificial light. Remarkable, Marcus murmured. Your people heal like the crystals grow by building new structures, rather than simply repairing old ones. Around them, the other mothers were settling their children, creating makeshift nests from salvaged ship materials and the sparse comfort items Marcus provided. The station's recycled air carried the scent of ozone and metal, but underneath, Zephyra detected something else. Hope, perhaps? The possibility of sanctuary? Why? She asked him as he tended to young Vera's injured child. Why help us? Your kind and ours have never met before. Marcus paused, his hands gentle on the child's broken wing strut. Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing, he said quietly. I've been that person who did nothing, not again. In the growing twilight of Kepler 4, for 2B's twin suns, 9 desperate souls found themselves sheltered by one broken man who'd discovered that isolation wasn't the same as peace. And for the first time in years, Marcus Vale began to remember what it felt like to be needed. Juno Starweaver's empathic abilities had always been both gift and curse. As she knelt beside Marcus's Vale in his workshop 3 days after their arrival, consciousness gently brushing against the fortress of his mind, she felt the weight of every life he'd failed to save, pressing down like a collapsed mountain. Your hands are steady, she murmured, watching him delicately adjust the wing brace he'd crafted for her youngest. Pip, the 6-year-old, had damaged his flight membranes in the crash. Without proper support, they'd never heal correctly. But your spirit trembles like crystal in a storm. Marcus glanced up from his work, silver-gray eyes meeting her luminous violet ones. In the past days, her empathic touch had become familiar. No longer the invasion he'd first perceived, but something closer to companionship. Does it bother you? The darkness in there? Juno's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Darkness exists to give meaning to light, Marcusavale. Your shadows are deep because your capacity for brightness runs deeper still. She'd been watching him with her children over the past days, seen how he'd converted entire sections of his underground complex into living spaces without being asked, how he'd rigged crystal resonators to mimic the light songs of their lost world, helping the young ones sleep, how he'd shared his carefully hoarded human chocolate with 14 alien children who'd never tasted sweetness like it. Mama Juno, Pip chirped, his newly braced wings twitching with excitement. Uncle Marcus says the crystals can sing. Can you make them sing louder? Uncle Marcus, she questioned, raising an eyebrow at the hermit who was suddenly coloring slightly. The children needed something to call me, Marcus said defensively, and they couldn't pronounce my human rank. Juno smiled, her empathic senses reading the truth beneath his gruff explanation. The children's innocent trust had begun healing. Wounds in him that 12 years of solitude had only made deeper. She placed her hand on the nearest crystal formation, one of the living mineral structures that grew throughout his cavern complex. Her gift extended beyond reading emotions. She could commune with the crystalline consciousness that permeated Kepler 440b. The minerals here were young compared to those of lost Valenthara, but they possessed a curious eagerness to please that reminded her of the children themselves. The crystals responded to her, a touch with a harmony that made the cavern walls hum. Light danced through their faceted surfaces, casting rainbow patterns that made Pip clap his hands in delight. The other children came running, drawn by the song, and soon the workshop echoed with their laughter. How do you do that? Marcus asked, wonder replacing his usual caution. All Velani can speak with crystal song to some degree, Juno explained, but healers. We form deeper bonds. Your world's minerals are young and eager. They've been alone as long as you have. Marcus studied the dancing lights, and she felt his engineer's mind working. Could you teach me? Not the empathic part, obviously, but the resonance principles. Why do you wish to learn? He was quiet for a long moment, watching Zephyr's twins chase light patterns across the cavern floor while their mother supervised. From a hover chair, her wing was healing, but flight remained weeks away. Because this place isn't just my sanctuary anymore. If it's going to be home to all of you, it should sing with welcome rather than loneliness. The simple honesty of his words made Juno's heart ache with sympathetic joy. She'd been reading his emotions for days now, but this was the first time he'd openly acknowledged the transformation happening within him. Show me your hands, she said. Marcus extended his scarred, calloused palms. 12 years of machinery work had left them rough and stained, but Juno saw their true nature hands that built, that fixed, that protected. She placed her own against them, her skin luminescent in the crystal light. Feel, she whispered, extending her empathic gift to include not just his emotions, but the living awareness of the crystals around them. The stones know intention. They respond to purpose, to connection, to love. Marcus gasped as the sensation hit him, suddenly aware of the vast network of living crystal that honeycombed the planet's crust. Each formation was a voice in an endless choir, singing the slow songs of geological time. But they could sing faster songs too, songs of welcome and warning, of joy and protection. They're alive, he breathed. More alive than most realized, Juno agreed. Your people harvest them like minerals, but they're closer to a collective consciousness. They've been trying to communicate with you for 12 years, but you never listened. Around them, the children had begun their own experiments. Tiny hands pressed to crystal surfaces as the stones responded with gentle pulses of light. Even the youngest seemed to understand instinctively what Marcus was learning through Juno's guidance. Mama Juno, called Zara, one of the older children, the crystals say Uncle Marcus has been sad singing for many years. Can we teach them happy? Songs instead? What do you think, Uncle Marcus? Juno asked, her smile radiant. Would you like to learn to sing with light? Marcus looked around at the children, at their mothers who'd begun to call this place home. At Juno, whose gentle presence had begun to heal something in him he'd thought permanently broken. To crystals pulsed around them, eager and welcoming, ready to transform his hermitage into something larger. Yes, he said simply, and felt the very stones around him harmonize in approval. For the first time in 12 years, Marcus Vale's sanctuary rang with more than just the echoes of machinery. Sang with the voices of the lost and found, creating something entirely new from the union of human engineering and Valani light song. And in that harmony, Juno glimpsed a future where exile might become home, where brokenness might become strength. The healing had only just begun. Captain Thorne Blackstell's ship emerged from hyperspace like a predator scenting blood. The modified heavy cruiser Vengeance's Edge bore the scars of 100 hunts, its hull black as void and bristling with tracking arrays that could follow a whisper across star systems. For 20 years, he'd been the hegemony's most successful bounty hunter, and the Valani refugees represented the largest payday of his career. Kepler 4 for to be, he mused to his bridge crew, studying the readouts. Isolated mining world, one human inhabitant. Perfect place to hide if you're desperate. His cybernetic left eye whirred as it analyzed the sensor data, highlighting the crystalline formations that had masked the refugees' signatures. Sir, his weapons officer reported, detecting multiple life signs at the mining station. 9 adult Valani, 14 juveniles. They matched the bounty profiles from the Valenthera survivors. Thorne's smile was sharp as broken glass. Each adult Valani was worth 50,000 credits to the hegemony, alive for interrogation, dead for proof of termination. The children were worth even more as potential subjects for the empathic warfare program. And the human? He asked. Unknown, sir? No response to standard identification protocols? The station's registered to a Marcus Vale, former Earth Military Engineering Corps. The name triggered recognition subroutines in Thorne's enhanced memory. Marcus Vale. He'd heard that name before, connected to some scandal years back. A whistleblower who'd exposed war crimes during the Centauri expansion. Disappeared into exile rather than face assassination. Interesting, Thorne murmured. Prepare a landing shuttle, full tactical gear. If this Vale character is harboring fugitives, he's complicit in crimes against the hegemony. Deep beneath Kepler 4 for 2B's surface, Marcus felt the crystal's warning. Songs shift from harmony to discord. He was in the main cavern with Juno and several of the children when the crystalline formation suddenly pulsed with agitated light. What's wrong? Juno asked, her empathic senses picking up his sudden tension. Something's coming, Marcus said grimly. The crystals are afraid. Zephora appeared at the cavern entrance, her wing braces allowing limited flight. The children sense it too. Hunters approaching from orbit. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Known this day would come, had been preparing for it without realizing it. The expanded living quarters, the hidden passages, the defensive positions he'd unconsciously built into every renovation. His military training had never really left. Him, how long do we have? He asked. Minutes, perhaps less, Zephora replied. My ship's scanner array was damaged, but I'm detecting a hegemony signature, heavy cruiser class. The children gathered around them, sensing the adult's fear. Pip pressed against Juno's side, while Zephyra's twins clutched their mother's robes. 14 young lives depending on decisions made in heartbeats. The deep tunnels, Marcus said. I've been excavating them for years. They connect to the crystal caves 5 kilometers north. You can hide there while I know, Zephira interrupted fiercely. You don't abandon those who shelter us. It's against everything we believe. This isn't your fight, Marcus protested. Juno placed a gentle hand on his arm. You made it our fight when you chose to heal rather than harm. The crystals sing your true nature, Marcus Vale. You're no more capable of surrender than we are. Through the station's external sensors, Marcus watched a sleek black shuttle descend through Kepler 4 for 2B's amber atmosphere. Its hull configuration screamed military, its approach vector calculated for intimidation. This wasn't a rescue or investigation. This was a hunt, Juno. Take the children to the deep sanctuary. Seal the passages behind you, Sephora. Can you fight? She finished, extending her wings to their full span. The healing braces gleamed with integrated crystal resonators that turned wing movement into sonic weapons. I'm not just a mother, Marcus. I was war leader of the Crystal Guard. The shuttle touched down 300 meters from the station entrance. Marcus watched through his cameras as armed figures in power armor deployed in textbook formation. Their leader removed his helmet, revealing a face that belonged in nightmare half-human, half-machine, with predator's eyes that had seen too much killing. Marcus Vale, the figure's voice boomed across the comm channels. This is Captain Thorne, Black Steel of the Hegemony Enforcement Division. You're harboring fugitives wanted for crimes against humanity. Surrender them immediately, and your cooperation will be noted in the official record. Marcus keyed the external comm, his voice steady. Despite the fear clawing at his chest, this is private property, Captain. You have no jurisdiction here. The Hegemony's jurisdiction extends wherever its enemies flee, Thorne replied. I'm offering you one chance to avoid being classified as a combatant. Through their empathic bond, Marcus felt Juno's gentle presence in his mind, lending him strength. The crystals around the station began to sing not the gentle harmonies he'd learned to appreciate, but something darker, more primal. The living stones of Kepler 404 to be had, chosen sides. Then I guess I'm a combatant, Marcus said, and cut the channel. The first explosion shook the station as Thorne's forces deployed siege charges against the main entrance. But Marcus had spent 12 years turning his sanctuary into something more than just shelter. Hidden weapon emplacements rose from crystal formations. Energy barriers, powered by the planet's living stone, sealed critical passages. The Hermits. Haven had become a fortress, and Marcus Valexile, fugitive, and reluctant guardian, prepared to face the shadows of his past for the future of 9 desperate mothers and their children. The crystals sang war songs now, ancient melodies of protection and sacrifice. And for the first time since his exile began, Marcus felt truly alive. 5 years had transformed the crystal canyons of Kepler 442b into something neither human nor Vellani could have imagined alone. What began as a desperate refuge had grown into a thriving settlement where 2 species learned to build something beautiful from their shared exile. Little Cosmos Vale Night Whisper pressed her small hands against the singing crystal walls of the nursery, her half-human, half-Vellani features glowing with wonder as the living stones responded to her touch. At 3 years old, she was the first of her kind, the bridge between worlds that her parents had never expected to create. The crystals tell stories, Papa, she said in the melodic voice that carried both Marcus's pragmatism and Zephyra's ethereal nature. Her tiny wings, still too small for flight, fluttered with excitement as rainbow light danced around her fingers. Marcus knelt beside his daughter, his weathered face soft with paternal love. The man who'd once hidden from the universe now found joy in showing it to new eyes. What stories do they tell today, little star? About the time before you were lonely, Cosmos said, with the matter-of-fact wisdom that children possess. When the stones wanted to sing but had no one to hear them, across the expanded cavern system, the settlement hummed with purposeful activity. The original 14 Vellani children had grown into confident young people who moved between human engineering and crystalline consciousness with natural ease. New refugees had found their way to the sanctuary, not just Vellani, but other species fleeing the hegemony's expansion. Kepler 44 to be had become a beacon for the displaced. Zephyra appeared in the nursery entrance, her wings fully healed and strengthened with crystal-enhanced structures that allowed flight beyond any natural Vellani capability. As colony leader, she'd helped negotiate the settlement's independence, with Earth's outer territories' government turning their refugee status into something resembling legitimacy. The Harvest Festival preparations are complete, she announced, wrapping one wing around Marcus as he stood. The children have composed new crystal songs for the celebration. The Harvest Festival had become their greatest tradition, a blending of human gratitude for abundance in Vellani, reverence for Crystal Song. Representatives from dozens of worlds would attend this year, drawn by stories of the impossible community that had sprouted in the Crystal Canyons. "Uncle Marcus." "Zephora," Pip called out. No longer the fragile child who'd needed wing braces, but a young adult whose hybrid human Velani engineering innovations were revolutionizing crystal technology. The new arrivals are asking about settlement protocols. More refugees had arrived that morning, a transport full of hegemony dissidents. Scientists who'd refused to participate in the empathic warfare program. The settlement's population had swelled to nearly 300 souls of various species, all learning to call Kepler-4 for to be home. Juno emerged from the medical center, her healer's robes now adorned with crystalline patterns that amplified her empathic abilities. At her side walked Dr. Tobias Chen, a human xenobiologist who joined the settlement the previous year. Their partnership had revolutionized understanding of interspecies medicine. "The integration process is proceeding smoothly," Juno reported. "The new arrivals are adapting to crystal song therapy faster than expected. Their children especially show remarkable resonance with the planetary consciousness." Marcus nodded, but his attention was drawn to the horizon where a familiar ship was descending through the amber atmosphere. Not a refugee transport this time, but an official, diplomatic vessel bearing the insignia of the Galactic Senate. Their early Zephora observed. The ship carried Senator Helena Voss, the human politician who'd championed their case for independent colonial status. But more importantly, it brought news of the hegemony's recent defeats and the growing coalition of worlds demanding reform. As the diplomatic party made its way into the settlement, Marcus felt a familiar presence in his mind. Not Juno's gentle, empathic touch, but something larger, the planetary consciousness itself. Speaking through the crystal network, they'd spent 5 years learning to understand. "Guardian Father," the voice whispered like wind through crystal caves. "The small bright one carries the future song. Through her 2 peoples become 1 people. The pattern grows beyond this world." Marcus looked down at Cosmos, who was chattering excitedly about the pretty ship in a mixture of human English and Velani light speech. In her mixed heritage, her ability to commune with crystal and machinery alike, her generation represented something neither species could have achieved alone. "Papa," she said, tugging on his shirt, "when I grow up, will there be more worlds like ours, where everyone sings together?" Marcus exchanged a look with Zephora, seeing the same hope reflected in her luminous eyes. Around them, their extended family of refugees turned colonists, prepared for another celebration of survival, community, and the endless possibility of building something better from the ashes of what was lost. "I think there will be little." "Star," he said, lifting Cosmos to his shoulders so she could touch the crystal formations near the cavern ceiling. "I think there will be many worlds where everyone learns to sing together." The crystals pulsed with approval, their songs carrying across the settlement and up through the planet's crust to dance among the stars. What began with 1 hermit's exile had become a symphony of hope, proving that sometimes the most profound journeys begin not with running toward something, but with opening the door when desperate souls arrive seeking shelter. In the growing twilight of Kepler-4 for 2B's twin suns, Marcus Vale, no longer solitary, no longer lost, stood surrounded by the family he'd never planned to have, watching his daughter reach for crystalline stars while planning for a future where exile might transform into homecoming for countless others. The guardian of the Crystal Haven had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes salvation comes not from finding yourself, but from helping others find their way home.